let's be real, Orgrimmar kinda sucks. It was updated back in Cataclysm, got a new look, but it was nearly 15 years ago and it really looks like a joke when you compare it with any other city we had gotten ever since, and this is like the Horde capital. Well, in the War Within beta, we just got first actual information that something may finally be coming that is going to change this situation. The Urton that had just joined the faction talk about opportunities to expand the capital, to add a new harbor, change some of the cliffs, expand the city, expand the industry. This new Orgrimmar harbor ties in perfectly with us going to Kazan, very likely in one of the patches that is very close to Orgrimmar, as well as Northrend in the Eastern Kingdoms. Additionally, the Sword of Sargeras is going to be relevant in Kalimdor, so having a strong Orgrimmar is going to be an asset. So what is all this new information and what type of a revamp is Orgrimmar going to get? If you guys want to buy Total War, Elder Scrolls, or any other game, you can get them at great prices with my Gamivo link. You can also get anything Warcraft related, gift cards and software, and all below market prices. Best of all, if you add my code DORON, you can get an even bigger discount, so make sure to check out my link in the description and get some amazing deals with Gamivo. So by this point, revamps are a pretty obvious thing. Previously, we talked about the world revamp coming as the next expansion, but there has been about a dozen interviews this past year that on multiple occasions confirmed that revamps are going to be coming in batches, very gradually, but over time, we will see a large difference. We're probably not going to get a Cataclysm-style shattering event where the entire world changes the day the expansion is launched in the near future, but we are going to get a ton of these infusions every minor and major patch throughout the World's Soul saga, and really, by the time the saga is over, we're going to be looking at a pretty different Azeroth. As we know, a Silvermoon revamp is 100% confirmed. They said that they're going to not just be expanding the entire Quota Laos with new models, but there will be new teams, like everything is going to be different and everything is going to be bigger. Then we got Undercity and Gilnea's Heritage questlines that didn't really do much other than clearing the plague and setting up the workers that are supposedly building Gilneas, but this is such an obvious setup for new models and new cities that are going to be coming in Midnight, but the expansion is going to be based on this part of the continent. Now, obviously, in Dragonflight, the Night Elves didn't just get a new city, but an entire new island, which was most major of these questlines. And most interestingly, if you follow the recent Draenei Heritage questline, the Draenei laid out a concept for a new city that they're going to establish somewhere on Azeroth, and we still don't really know the details how that is going to work out. I mean, for the Draenei, this of course makes sense, as Azeroth is now their permanent home. So, as you can see, this is a half a dozen setups for restored capitals that we are going to get in a short span of time, and by the new information from the War Within beta, it looks like Orgrimmar is going to be right next down the line. Let's just be completely blunt and honest, Orgrimmar kinda sucks. I mean, the original Orgrimmar had a nostalgia feel to it, but it really felt like a large camp as opposed to like the capital city of the Horde. And then Garrosh came in and militarized it and turned the entire city into a gigantic fortress, but this happened like back in 2010, and it really feels so outdated now, especially when compared to pretty much any other major city we had gotten ever since. By the new hints, it doesn't seem like Orgrimmar is going to get completely restructured, as we are going to get like a Suramar type Orgrimmar is going to be like 5 times bigger, but they're heavily implying that they're going to expand areas of it, very likely changing some of the cliffs, adding some new buildings, expanding the harbor. So the actual evidence for this is not just my speculation, comes from the Urton NPC that is now based in Orgrimmar called Modalm. Obviously, after the Khazakar questlines, the Urton had now officially joined the Horde, and one of them is talking with a Blackrock orc that is also a part of the Horde. The orc is telling him about the Blackrock Foundry from Draenor, how this was like the fortress of industry, an incredible orcish accomplishment of their industry that was lost, but he didn't really want to further explain why it was lost. And then they both essentially agree how Orgrimmar sucks, how despite the fact that the entire capital is a major fortress, it has a terrible, small and scattered industry with forges that don't exactly resemble a capital of the entire Horde. Then the Urton talks about how the opportunities to expand his newfound capital are endless, especially with the Urton techniques they had mastered, living underground for thousands and thousands of years and working all the forges. He mentions a seaside coolant system to supplement the Orgrimmar industry, cliff-carved quarries, and even a new port for trade. Now, when you think about this does actually make perfect sense, as the Earthen, as I said, have techniques that no one else has, and they're hardworking people, so obviously they're going to work on their new capital as well, and this is like the perfect opportunity for Blizzard to do like a half revamp of the terribly outdated Orgrimmar. However, I know what you may be thinking. I mean, this is literally just one NPC dialogue that could literally just be flavor text, you know, some drunken Earthen just rambling. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to update the capital, but it does actually align with all the other hints we had gotten throughout the alpha and the beta and what is to come in the World Soul Saga. First of all, it seems like Troll has at least on a few occasions actually returned to Orgrimmar. We can see his model in the beta and he's present there, which means that Orgrimmar is going to be related to the story of the War Within. Second is that they specifically mention expanding and updating the port. If you might have noticed something about Orgrimmar, that is that it has a terrible tiny little port that is about the size of Ratchet. When you compare this to the Stormwind Harbor that is like a huge military harbor with massive ships, it is actually ridiculous. And also, remember, originally Stormwind didn't have this type of a gigantic harbor. They just added this in Wrath of the Lich King, which was a similar half revamp they slipped in for the upcoming Northrend expedition. However, now the real question is, why exactly would they update Orgrimmar when we're going to Khazlagar in the War Within, we're going to the Eastern Kingdoms and Silvermoon in Midnight and Northrend in the Last Titan? And actually, there are quite a few hints we had gotten even now. First of all, the War Within and the Last Titan are going to be pretty large expeditions that are going to require a massive harbor to send them, especially Last Titan, as I feel like this is going to be a really major expedition, not just like what we're sending to Khazlagar, like it is going to be an all-out invasion of Northrend. The most important reason though is what is heavily hinted to be coming in the War Within, which means this Orgrimmar revamp may literally be happening as soon as 11.1. So if you guys have been following the news and what we had data mined, there are so many of these goblin assets, there are a ton of actual goblins in Khazlagar, and very heavy hints that we may be going to undermine in the Goblin Isle of Khazan. Despite the volcanic explosion and Cataclysm, Khazan hasn't actually been destroyed, it is still active, but most of the goblins that joined the Horde have moved to Orgrimmar, and now it might finally be time for them to go back home. Now, take a look at the official Chronicle map and examine where Khazan is, as well as Khazlagar. Khazan is not actually that far from Orgrimmar shore, and it is also quite close to Khazlagar as well. Even more interestingly, I'd wager that Khazan and Khazlagar are actually physically connected. Recent alpha information told us that a Nerubian tunnel exists between Khazlagar and Northrend, because we learned that Anub'arak asked for reinforcements to arrive through this exact tunnel that never actually came. Now, once again, examine the map and imagine where this tunnel would go. It would literally pass directly through Khazan and all the way into Azul-Nerub in Northrend. Additionally, if this old god ancient tunnel exists, it is likely that a tunnel also exists to the Akir that are around the Sword of Sargeras, but that is a topic for another video. The point is, if we do get patch content of going back to Khazan, we will need the Orgrimmar port in order to send the expedition, as it is logistically the biggest base to mount an expedition from. I'm guessing we're going to be examining the underground connection as well, but we will also need troops and ships above the ground as well. Because of this, I think it is actually highly realistic that the Orgrimmar revamp will be happening very soon. Like, it is perfectly laid out. Technologically advanced Earthen joined the Horde, and this is the excuse they need to expand the capital with this new technology. The expedition is the excuse to expand the port. Furthermore, there is an absolute ton of empty space around Orgrimmar and Durotar, so this isn't even really all that much work. They won't really need to do any major reconstructions. They would need to do something akin to the Stormwind Harbor, add a few more ports, places for big warships and the Zeppelins. To supplement this, they might carve out some of the cliffs for the Zeppelins and also expand the industry for like the visual effect of the Horde improving and expanding their economy for this upcoming conflict. So realistically, we're probably not going to get a gigantic new Orgrimmar with every building updated like we're going to get an entirely new Silvermoon, but we are looking at least a significantly enlarged Orgrimmar Harbor, changes to some of the buildings, and also changes to some of the cliffs that are surrounding Orgrimmar. Thank you for watching. Check out my video on the 2 new zones we could get in the patches for the War Within by clicking on the screen, and check out my video on the ancient Roman mythology and the cult of Mithras by clicking on the screen as well. See you next time.